for this precious day.
You just
We're all gathered here.
I can't hear.
And those far
Can you make it a little
away.
louder, please? I think it's right.
For this time we share.
All the way up.
With love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. We're all gathered here and those far away. For this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Thank you. Welcome to everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Manhattan. I am Dick Beeman. I'll be your convener for today. I want to welcome both members and visitors, old-timers and newcomers, whether you are here in person at the fellowship or whether you are Zooming to us. We welcome all people of goodwill, regardless of your religious beliefs, if any, regardless of the path of your spiritual journey, if any, regardless of wealth, race, gender identity, sexual orientation, or the extent or limits of your abilities. We strive to look through external superficialities and to look past our own prejudices and stereotypes, to see the true inner beauty, worth, and dignity of every person. We have no creed, but adhere to the 7 Unitarian Universalist principles, which are drawn from all of the many available sources of truth and wisdom, including science, poetry, history, and personal experience. I invite visitors to sign the guest book in the lobby and indicate whether you wish to receive our monthly newsletter, and perhaps if there are online visitors, they could put that information in the chat if they're interested.
Hi all, I'm Pastor Isabel Call. It's my pleasure to be the minister of the UU Fellowship of Manhattan. And I'd like to start with a thanks to all the wonderful people who put together our service every day. So every Sunday. It's been an amazing couple years growing into multi-platform services. So thank you. So a couple of announcements, 3 actually, for some upcoming activities. On Saturday the 27th, right after Thanksgiving, we'll be having a movie night on Zoom. It'll be a film called Mission Joy, which is a documentary with the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. So Saturday, November 27th, and there will be a link coming out in the weekly news for that. I'll be hosting. Then on December 8th, and I'll just say that will be launching our December theme of joy. So December 8th, we will be bringing back our Wednesday tradition of Active Wednesday, bringing people together for activities and committee work. If you're not on a committee, come anyway. We'll be having some fun first. This will be our virtual rendition of Active Wednesday. So we'll start at 6 with some music, and you can cook and eat with your cameras off, and then we'll get together a little after that. So more details coming. That's Wednesday the 8th. And then on the weekend of December 11th and 12th, if you're interested in going deeper into Unitarian Universalist work right now around anti-racism, there's an excellent workshop and retreat that will be held online called Compass. So keep your eyes out for that. It's a weekend retreat with UUs from around the country. Also, take a look at our announcements in the order of service. A lot of fun stuff coming up. So, welcome all.
Thank you, Pastor Isabel. A hint of winter is already in the air, and no one knows that better than a migratory bird. So let today's chalice flame represent the wisdom and foresight of the wild creatures of the earth, while Sylvia reads Something Told the Wild Geese by Rachel Field.
Something told the wild geese it was time to go. Though the fields lay golden, something whispered, snow. Leaves were green and stirring, berries luster-glossed, but beneath warm feathers, something cautioned, frost. All the sagging orchards steamed with amber spice, but each wild breast stiffened and remembered ice. Something told the wild geese it was time to fly. Summer sun was on their wings, winter in their cry.
Today's hymn is Let It Be a Dance. Those on Zoom, please sing along with us, but make sure you're muted. Thank you, Renee. It is now time for all ages. I don't see any kids. Am I missing any? That's no problem, though, because no problem, because the story was intended for everybody. So here goes. This is an ancient story from an ancient Australian legend, and I don't remember where I first heard this story, but I wrote down what I remembered about it and to tell you today. It's possible that I dreamed it, and it's also possible that someone dreamed it for me. I'm not certain. The only thing I'm certain about is that it is a true story. You probably know that Australia is a small continent on the other side of the world, or it actually could be a giant island. I'm not really sure which it is. You might also know that white people, Europeans, first came to Australia about 400 years ago, and you probably also know that it was very much longer before that the first people came, the Aborigines came more than 50,000 years before the Europeans came. The thing you might not know is that long before that time, Australia was barren, it was empty. There were no plants, no people, no animals. It is true that there were earth spirits, of course, but they were all deeply asleep in perpetual darkness and silence, deep in underground caves. The Sun Mother herself was also asleep, but she decided to wake herself up and also to wake the sleeping earth spirits. So she opened her eyes, and the rays beamed down to the sleeping earth, and those rays filtered down into the caves and slowly awakened the earth spirits. Each animal and plant spirit then arose and emerged from the caves and spoke its welcome to the new world. The creatures with voice sang their particular songs of new life. The cricket spirit sang its song. The bird spirit sang its song. Each animal and plant spirit grew and multiplied into a family. The bird family all lived together in a valley, and they spoke to the world in the language of song. And what that song meant was, I am of the bird spirit. See me and recognize me. That's what their song meant. But after a time, some of the bird people grew restless and curious about what lay beyond their little valley. And they went off on their own to start a new community at some distance away. Others of the bird people did the same, and soon there were many bird families scattered all over Australia. Over time, each of these separate bird clans began to develop their own unique habits and ways, even their own unique songs, slightly different from that first song of their bird spirit ancestor. But that new song now meant something a little different for each clan. It meant, I am of the mountain bird clan, or I am of the river bird clan. See me and recognize me, but do not confuse me with the riverbird clan. Do not confuse me with the valley bird clan. At first, each bird person knew its song purely by instinct. He was born already knowing the song of his clan. No one had to teach him that song. I say he because the male bird people were always boasting and showing off their beautiful voices. The females didn't feel they had to impress anyone, so they didn't just go around singing at anyone and everyone they met. They were more modest. But then the different bird clans got jealous of each other's songs, and the bragging contest intensified to where the males of each clan invented more elaborate songs than the ones they'd been born with, to try to outdo their cousins in a different clan. These new songs got more complicated, and pretty soon the newborn bird people of that particular clan could no longer sing those songs purely by instinct. Instead, the older bird people had to teach their hatchlings and nestlings how to sing them. And those new songs meant new things, different things. Now they didn't just mean, I am of the riverbird clan, but they also meant things like, choose me as a mate because I sing better. Well, as you might expect, those young nestlings got pretty darn good at imitating what they heard. They had to be able to learn the song of their clan. Otherwise, their clan brothers and sisters wouldn't even recognize or accept them as family. But then some smart young bird figured out that if he imitated the song of a different clan, he could pretend to be a member of that clan. Maybe that other clan's territory had better food, more plentiful nuts and berries, more delicious worms and grubs. So he imitated the song of that clan and lived the high life on his neighbor's land. He wasn't around as much for his own family. He neglected to teach his own children how to sing their own clan song. Eventually, too many of his clanmates tried the same trick, to sneak into the rival's territory, leaving their own nestlings unattended. So those nestlings didn't learn their song as well, or they didn't learn it at all. Pretty soon there was no one left who could remember the song, and the bird people of that clan lost their language. Males didn't know how to ask females to be their mates. Females couldn't tell which males belonged to their clan. And because they could no longer talk to each other, that clan disappeared forever. Now, I'm not saying those birds should have just stayed home, never showing any interest in their neighbors or in the outside world. No. Of course, it's good to explore and change and learn new things, to develop a new voice and learn new songs. You should be curious about what lies beyond. But sometimes, maybe, if you pretend to be something you are not, if you pretend to be someone other than your true self, you might just lose yourself. It's just something to think about. We can talk about it later if you want to. And even though there are no kids here, let's sing them away in spirit to wherever they're going to go to learn new things. Our hearts go with you, go enjoy, our hopes go too. Learn in love and grow in wisdom. Shine your light in all you do. Go in love, our hearts go with you. Go enjoy, our hopes go too. Learn in love and grow in wisdom. Shine your light in all you do. During today's offertory or at any other time, you can make donations to our regular UUFM operating funds, to the new Blessing Box at the Wonder Workshop Children's Museum, to the Afghan Right. Please indicate the intended recipient on your check, and cash and checks will be directed to the Helping Hands recipient unless otherwise directed. If you have joys or concerns, please type them into the Zoom chat box at this time, or for those here in person, there are a few note cards in the middle of the room and some pencils, and so write your joys and concerns there, and I will collect them during the offertory. Now relax and enjoy Renee's performance.
This morning, we share many joys with each other. It's a bright, clear, crisp morning with this incredible view out our window. And we are sharing the joy with Clara Mayfield, who led her Carleton cross-country team to their conference championship recently. Kathleen Oldfather shares a joy that she will gather with 4 of her 5 siblings next weekend to celebrate her brother's wedding in San Francisco. So, yay. And a general joy for the ways that we're learning to be with each other in COVID times, and the ways that we're coming back to some things we love. Specifically, Renee Brown shares she'll be having a performance with her band Funtabi on the 18th, I think that's next Friday, at Auntie May's, 9 p.m. So for those of you enjoying live music, that will be a wonderful occasion. And then we have a gratitude from Tom Phillips, gratitude that small children can now receive COVID vaccinations. Yeah. So holding all these joys and all the others that we bring with us this morning, alongside the other parts of human experience, the sorrows, the concerns, the complexities that are woven together in our lives. Let's enter into a moment of pause and reflection with each other. Let us move into the rest of our service, ready for the silences that come and ready for the insight that comes.
I'm reading an excerpt from Love by Leo Bascaglia, and it's very male-oriented and it's in his writing, but it's worth getting past it for the message. And if I had to call it something else, I would call it, or give it a title, I'd call it Becoming. Okay. If a man in the street were to pursue his self, what kind of guiding thoughts would he come up with about changing his existence? He would perhaps discover that his brain is not dead yet, not yet dead, that his body is not dried up yet, and that no matter where he is right now, he is still the creator of his own destiny. He can change this destiny by taking his one decision to change seriously, by fighting his petty resistance against change and fear, by learning more about his mind, by trying out behavior which fills his real need, by carrying out concrete acts rather than conceptualizing about them, by practicing to see and hear and touch and feel as he has never before used these senses, by creating something with his own hands without demanding perfection, by thinking out ways in which he behaves in a self-defeating manner, by listening to the words that he utters to his wife, his kids, and his friends, by listening to himself, by listening to the words and looking into the eyes of those who speak to him, by learning to respect the process of his own creative encounters, and by having faith that they will get him somewhere soon. We must remind ourselves, however, that no change takes place without working hard and without getting your hands dirty. There are no formulae and no books to memorize on becoming. I only know this: I exist. I am. I am here. I am becoming. I make my life, and no one else makes it for me. I must face my own shortcomings, mistakes, and transgressions. No one can suffer my non-being as I do, but tomorrow is another day, and I must decide to leave my bed and live again. And if I fail, I don't have the comfort of blaming you or life or God.
Thank you, Kathleen. It's a real pleasure for me to introduce today's speaker, Dave Rintoul. Dave is a native Kansan. He was a professor of biology at KSU for 17 years, where he served as teacher, researcher, and leader before retiring about 4 years ago. Dave has always had a deep interest in the natural world and in photography, beginning early in his youth in Garden City, where he grew up. He developed his academic background in biology and biochemistry at the University of Kansas, Stanford, and Washington University before coming to K-State. He's published several books and has exhibited his photographs at local galleries. He has pursued his interests in the natural world and in photography even more avidly since retiring. He is both incredibly knowledgeable about birds, as I'm sure we'll learn in a few minutes, and has a real knack for capturing magnificent images of these glorious creatures. So I now hand the podium over to Dave Rintoul to tell us about birds and conservation in New Zealand. Welcome, Dave, and if you could unmute yourself.
Howdy. I'm glad to be here and see some familiar faces and some new faces. It's good to have an opportunity to talk to you. I have a show. I'm being an old professor. I have a PowerPoint, of course. So I would like to be able to share that, and I will try to do that just even as we speak. This one here. See if it goes. Can you see it? Okay, good to know. I've been to New Zealand a bunch of times, and when Dick asked me to talk here to you guys, I thought, what can I talk about? And I thought, well, there's a good story here, and it's a story of loss and redemption, and maybe that's a valuable thing. This is the Southern Alps in New Zealand. The Southern Alps are not tremendously tall, but are quite gorgeous. Somebody once quoted to me that if you dropped your camera in New Zealand, you would take a good picture. I did not drop my camera for this one, but it's almost that bad. You really can take a picture of gorgeous, gorgeous things every time you turn around. Okay, well, today, let's see, how do I need to get to that. There we go. Go on to the next slide. New Zealand, as you may or may not know, is more than 2 islands. There's a lot of islands. It's an archipelago of islands, and it's part of a submerged landmass, which some people call a continent of Zealandia. It's important to know the history of it because the history is going to help us understand what's going on today. As always, the history makes it important, makes it easier to figure out how we got here. It originated on the eastern edge of a big supercontinent called Pangaea and was included on the eastern edge of another supercontinent called Gondwana 150 million years ago. When Gondwana broke up to become Asia, India, parts of Africa, Madagascar, Zealandia was 85 million years ago. Zealandia began to separate. And if you know anything about the history of the Earth, 80 to 85 million years ago is before the meteorite that killed off the dinosaurs. So when it separated, there was basically not a lot of things except reptiles and and plants and things like that on that chunk of land. And the other thing that's interesting about it is a lot of it was submerged until about 25 million years ago. It was really an archipelago. There was nothing, not much of it was above water. Gondwana plant and animal groups now represented across the southern hemisphere, and in many cases only in the southern hemisphere. The ratites, which are things like ostriches and emus and rheas, the big flightless birds, are all southern hemisphere birds. Southern beaches, very different from our beaches up here. Another plant group called the podocarps, etc. They are definitely not found in the northern hemisphere. The separation of this minor chunk of land occurred before the rise of mammals. And interestingly, there were apparently no mammalian ancestors on that landmass at the time of separation. Either that or they went extinct when the landmass they were on got underwater. It's not really clear. There are no fossils that anyone has found of very many mammals in New Zealand. And so at the time of discovery by humans, which you heard from Dick that Australia was settled 50,000 years ago, New Zealand was discovered by the Maori in 1280. So less than 1,000 years ago. It was completely isolated, completely devoid of humans. And there are only 3 mammal species, and they're all bats, one of which actually lives on the ground. So they have no mammals. All the niches were filled by birds and insects. And that means the predators were birds, the browsers, the cows. I mean, things the are analogous to our herbivores on land were birds. Everything was birds. It was a land of birds. That's why I'm interested in it. But it is also absolutely unique. And it's so unique that in fact today, the government of New Zealand's money, every bill and every coin has a picture of a bird on it. This is the $100 bill. It has a mohua, which is a yellowhead. This is the $1 coin. It's called a kiwi. Like the coins in Canada are called loonies because they have a loon on them. This is a kiwi. And all the bills, all the coins have a bird on them. So the government and the people of New Zealand are constantly reminded that this was a land of birds, and it was in a lot of ways unique. Okay, well, what happened to those birds? Well, about 1280 AD, the Maori found it. They called it Aotearoa, which means land of the long white cloud, because that's how they probably saw it when they first approached it from the sea. Long white cloud in the distance. It had a bunch of islands, and they were almost all forested. Southern beaches, podocarps, all kinds of big trees, some of which are, now found nowhere else in the world. And it had a rich and unique avifauna. It had 80 million years to develop all those critters, and that's a long time. Most of the birds were flightless. They didn't have any land predators. Most of them were large relative to their relatives elsewhere. Most of them nested on the ground as well as being flightless. They were unwary of humans, obviously, because they had no clue that humans were even out there. And interestingly, a lot of them have a scent. If you know anything about our birds here in North America, they're pretty much scent free, which is because a lot of their predators, like rats and cats and weasels, operate olfactorily, and they need to be able to not be detectable by smell. But a lot of birds in New Zealand actually have a distinct smell. The Polynesians, the Maori, when they landed, deliberately introduced the Pacific rat. They would carry cages of rats on their canoes, and those rats would be released, literally on purpose, to function as a food source. Should they ever find their way back to that island again, they could at least eat the rats if they can catch them. And so the rats were introduced around 1280. Populations grew, hunting, fishing, habitat changes, and the rat resulted in the extinction of about 20 bird species prior to contact with Europeans. So 20 bird species that were there, that we know were there when the Maori landed, were not there by the time the Europeans figured out there was a continent there. And of those, the most exciting or most remarkable were the moa. This is a moa skeleton in a museum in Auckland. They can be large, flightless, herbivorous, and in fact, they're wingless. They don't even have wing bones. When the first moa skeletons were sent off to Richard Owens in England, he thought this had to be a fake because there were no bones where the wings should be. They have not only lost, the wings, they've lost any hint that there was ever a wing. Just like in whales still have leg bones. Moas don't have any wing bones at all. They're very strange. They had one predator. It was a very large eagle, the largest eagle in the world at the time. Still would be if it was still around. It's not. Had about a 10-foot wingspan in the big ones. Weighed about 28 pounds on the big ones. This is not a thing to be trifled with. And it would attack moas by finding them in the underbrush and knocking their heads off, literally flying at them and knocking them in the skull, which was hazardous to the Maori once the moas went away, because they would think, oh, there's something I can knock in the skull, and they would go after the Maori. So the Maori extincted them as well. All 9 species of moa, as well as Haas eagle, were extinct within 2 centuries after the Maori arrived. These were large, tasty, we presume, easy to kill, easy to find, and once they were gone, the eagle didn't have anything to eat and went after the Maori, and once the Maori figured that out, the eagle wasn't around either. So that was those. There are a lot of other species of birds which were extincted by the Maori, but these are some of the major ones. So European contact occurred in 1642. Abel Tasman from Holland, sailing in the South Pacific on a voyage of discovery, discovered the South Island. He and his crew never set foot on the island. The Maori sent canoes out, and they were sufficiently threatened by this that they said, we'll just bail, and they did. They took off. But they remembered where it was. A Dutch cartographer made a map and named it New Zealand. And this photo is Elizabeth standing on a beach at the same site where Tasman tried to come ashore and decided the better of it. 1769, Captain Cook, sailing from England, landed on the North Island. 2 of the naturalists on his ship made the first collections of plants and animals from New Zealand. Joseph Banks and Daniel Solander, big names in the history of science. There were many other voyages of discovery, but the settlers at the time, prior to the mid-1820s, were basically whalers and missionaries. They go together, I guess. But whalers, sealers, and missionaries were the people who were on the islands. In 1839, there were only about 2,000 Europeans in New Zealand. But then they decided that they wanted to make it into England. And by 1852, there were about 28,000. They were clearing the land, bringing in cattle, planting crops, and generally not getting along with the Maori, who thought that this was kind of an imposition, on their lifestyle. There was a lot of conflict, a lot of battles, a lot of wars. And the Treaty of Waitangi was adopted in 1840, which has some rights for the Maori and a lot of rights for the English crown, basically giving them sole jurisdiction over the islands and the people. And in fact, today, even though New Zealand has been independent from England for a while, all of the land that is not private property is called crown land. The crown still has it. There was still more conflict. In 1861, there was an invasion of a very productive Maori district, Waikato, and they routed the Maori, and the colony was open for business. Open for business means, in the case of the British, they clear cut stuff and planted crops. They introduced English species, clover, wheat, barley, cattle, horses, sheep. This is a non-native plant here. This is the foxglove from Europe, which was introduced. That is a European bumblebee. Interestingly, the European bumblebee is now going extinct in England, and they are importing bumblebees back from New Zealand to help out the New Zealand, or to help out the English populations. Starting in 1867, there were things called the Acclimatization Societies. And with government encouragement and funding, they really did try to turn it into England. They began importing plants and animals that they were familiar with from back in the old country. Trout, deer, moose. Can you imagine putting a moose on a wooden sailing ship and dragging it across the sea? That's intrepid. Elk, zebras, yeah. Geese, a lot of fish, salmon, but also the nasty ones would be possums from Australia, and then rabbits, various finches and thrushes, and cats and stoats. Stoats are weasels and not good with wildlife. They don't play well with others. So a combination of these predators that were introduced, invasive species, habitat loss, active extermination, and small population sizes of the remaining birds meant that they could flicker out of existence quite quickly. There was a new wave of extinctions, and it was, a remarkable story. There's a lot of really horrible anecdotes. There's a species of wren called the Stevens Island wren. There are 8 or 9 specimens of this wren in existence in museums. All of them were collected by the lighthouse keeper's cat, who brought the lighthouse keeper these little prizes every morning, and he would ship them off to museums, and those are the only ones we know about. The cat was should have been credited on the museum tags. It didn't. It did a good job. And then there's invasive species. All of these are European birds, except for this one here. This is a lovely California quail. I saw more California quail in New Zealand than I've ever seen in California. But we have song thrush, starling, of course, chaffinch. Some of them were self-introduced. That is, they're invasive, but they weren't there originally, like this Australian magpie, which is a major bird predator as well, and this thing called the silver eye or a white eye, which is a smaller bird, but made its own way there as well. But a lot of birds were deliberately introduced, and they obviously take resources from the birds that were there. Major I guess tragedy of this one was this bird called the huia. The huia is in the honeyeater family. This is a male. The males and females had different sized bills. This is a male from the specimen collection in the War Museum in Auckland. These are skulls. I've never seen skulls that had glass eyes implanted in them. It struck me as very weird, but there you go. The huia were extincted because there were small populations, but also because the Maori enjoyed the feathers. These feathers here on this guy's headdress are huia tail feathers. These are a tray of huia specimens in that museum, and you can see the tail feathers. The tail feathers have these lovely black, glossy black with white tips, and they're very striking. That tray right there full of birds is probably worth hundreds of thousands of dollars on the market for the Maori today, because those feathers are very valuable. They have boxes that they keep, special boxes that they keep the ancestors, the feathers that they've inherited from their ancestors, and they wear them in their hakas. This is a haka. This is a ceremonial dance. You can see all these guys have either good huia, real huia feathers, or fake huia feathers. Sometimes they have to resort to fake huia because there ain't no huias around anymore. We can't find any more unless we want to raid that museum, and I think that would be frowned upon in New Zealand. But anyway, that bird went out in the 1890s, some or 19, but it lasted until about 1900, but it generally vanished. Okay, so this is all bad, right? I mean, these birds being extincted, a lot of them are in danger of still now. But this is the redemption part. The problem was starting to be recognized in the 1880s, and there were people at that time who decided that the easiest way to help these species was to move them to remote islands that they thought were free of these invasive species, including rats and stoats. Turns out that island sanctuaries do work and are still one strong conservation strategy, but you still have to be actively engaged in removing the predators. Habitat loss and restoration of the original forested habitat is something that really is active right now as well. But in every case, you need to have active trapping and poisoning of these pests. And if you have never been to New Zealand, you really don't understand their antipathy toward these critters, which they now know are killing off their birds. I've seen people swerve onto the other side of the road to kill a possum. They are after them, and they are actively, doing that yet today. There's also things called fence sanctuaries where we'll talk about some of those, where they put up fences around a big chunk of land and actively get rid of the mammals inside, and then they can release birds inside. And that does seem to work. Here's some of the island sanctuaries. If you ever get to New Zealand, visit Tiri Matangi. If you get there, you're going to fly into Auckland. Almost entirely likely that's the only place you're going to get to. Right out of Auckland, about a half-hour boat ride, is an island called Tiri Matangi, which is one of the oldest island sanctuaries. There's some of the others: Kapiti, Maud, Codfish, and Ova, cleared down at the south. Tiri was farmed until 1984, when it was taken over by the Department of Conservation. This is what it looked like in 1940, very little tree cover, and what it looked like in 2002 with recovered trees. And they have introduced a lot of really cool birds out there. It's accessible by ferry from the Auckland Harbor. You can take a day trip and get back in the afternoon, or you can stay overnight, which a couple of friends of mine have done, and it's apparently wonderful. Here's some of the birds. This is a bellbird. This is the biggest songster, not big, the noisiest probably songster in New Zealand. Cook's boat. There's a report from, I think, Banks, who said that the bird song that they could hear from the boat every morning was just almost deafening. And many of those singers were bellbirds. This is a saddleback, another honey eater, another great songster. And this little duck is a brown teal, endangered. There's maybe 300 of those left in the world, but they are theoretically coming back. And the whitehead, it's like that little yellow head on the $100 bill, cute little chickadee-sized bird. None of these birds would be making it very well if they didn't get rid of all the predators on that island, and they didn't keep all those predators away by ensuring that boats that travel there are pest-free, et cetera, et cetera. They do a lot of things to make that happen. They also have stitch birds, the hihi, which is a very colorful and song-filled little bird. The kakariki, a little parakeet. This big guy is the takahe. The takahe are originally from the South Island. Well, let's just say by the time the Europeans arrived, the Maori had extincted the takahe from the North Island, and they were only in the South Island. It's the biggest rail in the world. It's the size of a small turkey. It's a good sized bird. And they are ground nesting, ground flightless, absolutely would be fair prey for any dog, cat, stoat, thing like that. And the iconic bird of New Zealand, the tui, the parson bird. It's called the parson bird because it has this little white collar thing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about fence sanctuaries. They use pest-proof fencing and pest-proof. I'll show you some pictures. It's a remarkable thing, but they encircle native forest, and then they poison their trap inside until they're sure it's pest-free. They have absolute airtight monitoring protocols to make them understand that it's pest-free. And then they can, once they are certified pest-free, they can get some native species from the Department of Conservation and release them. It takes 2 years of being pest-free. So 2 years where none of your traps and none of your sightings say there's anything inside. And then they'll allow you to start to put birds in there. But they still constantly monitor them. It's not really clear what the long-term viability of this is, because you have this lovely native forest. In 50 years, will it still be native forest with climate change? We don't know. It's an open question. Here are some of the French sanctuaries. Mongotatri on the North Island is the oldest one. Zealandia in the middle of the city of Wellington is another one. Brook Waimarama, Elizabeth's brother, was the director of that sanctuary for a while. And way down in the south, one called Oronuki. This is Mongotatri. It's a mountain that was forested and was never cleared. It is now enclosed by a 2-meter tall and 47-kilometer long fence on the top of a mountain. And it's a pretty cool place. Fencing began in 2003. It was completed in 2004. It is still the longest one in the world. They have noticed, as we have here, that if you get rid of invasive species, the forest comes back. The invasive species like rabbits and things like that were eating the seedlings. Now they survive. And most uniquely of all, this is overseen by a community trust. This is not a government project. This is not a state project. This is a little dinky town and a community in that part of the North Island, which raises the money, which gets grants, which manages the property and has since it was built. It's all grassroots, which is just a remarkable thing to me. But like I say, they love their birds. Here's the fence, 7 feet tall. And underneath this part, there's fencing out to here, so nothing can dig under it. And it just goes around the mountain, around the top of the mountain. Special stainless steel fence. It's remarkably expensive and very, very effective. Some of their cool birds and critters. This is a Tuatara. Not a dinosaur. It's older than the dinosaurs in terms of its lineage. It's a crazy thing. And a weka, a weta. I get the wekas and the wetas mixed up. This is a weta. This is a insect the size of a good-sized cricket. And there's tree ones and cave ones, and that's obviously a tree one. There's these birds like this major pigeon, New Zealand pigeon, the Kereru, which is the size of a duck. I mean, it's a good sized critter. And then they have these things they call robins. They're related to the European robin, not much, but they're basically a warbler sized thing, and very long legs and very inquisitive, as you can see. Fantails, which have a cool tail that they flicker open and close to startle insects in the forest. And again, the tui. Okay, well, what can we learn from this? One thing we can learn is that recovery of these species is possible. Many of these bird species are now at, as far as we know, high population numbers since Europeans arrived. It does work, but it's very labor and very time intensive, and it takes more than just the government. It takes the people to do it. Recovery of the habitat is possible, but invasive species are going to be there until you fence it off. Invasive species are going to find it, and you really have to deal with it. There are proposals to do something very radical in New Zealand, which is to free the country of cats completely. That is house cats and wild cats. That's, as you can imagine, controversial, may not ever happen. But if it did happen, it would make a major difference in a lot of these birds' lives. The knowledge and the commitment of the average New Zealander to their birds and recovery of their birds is amazing to me. You can go on a hike on a trail in New Zealand and you'll meet somebody and they'll ask you what you saw. And if you were here in North America, you can say, oh, I saw this species and that species. And they'll go, oh, that's cool. If you go right up there, you'll see, like 16 other things that, they have tracked and they know what they are and they have identified them and they will tell you all about them. Unlike in North America, you do not meet very many ignorant birders out there. There's a lot of knowledgeable birders. The long-term prospects are cloudy. Climate change is a biggie. Climate change was not a factor in the previous extinctions, but it's there now, and we got to think about it. And if you want to look up some of these things, this is the Brook Sanctuary, the Brook Waimaramara Sanctuary website, brooksanctuary.org. And this is a really wonderful website operated by the National Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa. And it has incredible pictures and detailed histories of all of the birds of New Zealand, including the extinct ones. So if you ever have a free afternoon and just want to check out a really nice website, newzealandbirdsonline.org.nz is really a beautiful, beautiful place to browse and spend your time. And with that, I am done. This is a lovely sunset in the South Highland. When we were looking for kiwis, we didn't find any. We heard them, and that's good enough for me. Well, thank you.